hand with it. I'm delighted to be here. Can you all hear? Yeah. Is that working all the way down? Okay. Today, it's largely going to be a financial brief, but we'll have time at the end, particularly with a significant number of Virginia Beach School customers here today, students. I'm excited to get feedback from you and suggestions as well as questions. So we'll have plenty of time at the end. I'm going to run through some of the slides fairly quickly. I've given this a similar pitch that runs about 40 minutes. That's way too long. So if I appear to be rushing, it's because I really want to have the feedback session towards the end. Going to be talking largely budget, revenues. The schools get we get our funds from local, federal, and state. But I also have the word other there. And that is significant because those other funds really provide a significant level right on the margin that are very important. We receive private funds from the Education Foundation that does golf tournaments, and they actually build a house using students from our tech center that are in the construction trades, everything from masons to electricians to landscape. The foundation buys a lot. The students, collaborating with a contractor, actually build a house over a couple-year period. That house is then sold. Those funds come back into the classroom as grants for special things that we can't do across the city, but we want to try. The other major other that comes into our school system are the volunteers. We have like 20,000 volunteers that come in and do everything from folding papers to helping greet people and that's huge. Frankly, without them, I tell the volunteers, in fact, I'll tell them next Thursday night where we have a recognition program for them. Frankly, they make the difference between good schools and great schools. When you have that kind of community support, that's huge, and I would be remiss if I didn't miss that when we're talking about the resources coming in to make our schools what they are. The expenses, I've thrown out 4 categories that we'll talk about: instruction, transportation, capital and maintenance of the facilities, as well as compensation for our employees. Our budget's gone down a whole lot in the last 4 years. You can see in 08, we were $720 million, almost up to 740 in 09, and where we are for next year is about 636. That's been tough. We've had to make some major adjustments. We've increased class sizes. We've stopped putting money into the capital program to move our building program along. That's tough. The city, as you can see, that's the one in the red line. They've had to make some adjustments over the last 4 years as well. These pie charts kind of give you an idea of the amount or the magnitude of funding from each of the sources. The green is the local. The local funds over this 3-year period have gone from 342 to 298. We get funding from 7 different sources out of the local tax streams. The largest of that is real estate assessments, and obviously as assessments have plummeted over the last few years, so have school revenues. The blue is the state funding, and that's gone from 364 down to 307. The states obviously had to make major adjustments in what they could do in terms of education as well. That has come down. There is another huge factor on the state funding, which I'll get to in just a moment, on why that has dropped. Federal funds, you hear a lot about federal funds. They make frankly, they make a lot of noise because they impose a lot of mandates, but they remain a fairly, I hate to use the word insignificant, but you can see they're the purple. I'm sorry, they're the red. And they're not huge. They're about 2.5% on average for our budget. And this purple area here in the last two charts is one-time funding. One time is where you're using a source that is not going to be there next year. And we're having to do that, and I'll get back into that in a few minutes. That's not a good thing. Federal funding, we get military impact. All communities that have military assets in their communities, such as Oceana, the federal government gives us funds to offset the money that we would not, that we might otherwise get because of the fact those lands cannot be taxed. We get part of the federal funding is called Title I, which is targeted in the schools for their demographically challenged, lower income, and that money is very specifically earmarked. We have no flexibility until we are required to put it into very specific programs, and we do, and obviously it helps those schools. But again, it's pretty well locked in. And we also get some special education funds. The mandates for what we do for special education students are very specific, and the federal funds cover in the range of 20 to 30% of what they tell us we have to do. We did get some stimulus funds. We got federal jobs funds about a year ago. $14.5 million, which we'll talk about in a few minutes on what we're doing with that. The stimulus funds were all put into the construction of College Park Elementary. Did not cover the entire project, but it did cover a significant portion. State funding. State funding is based on there are different types: sales tax, basic aid. The basic aid is the largest portion. That aid is driven by how many students we have. It's referred to as ADM, which is average daily membership. In other words, the enrollment in our schools. However, those funds coming into each city or each school division are means tested. The state looks at how much we should, based on our ability on real estate and income, be able to fund ourselves. And then we do get they give us the VRS, or retirement funding, for those, a portion of it for those positions they recognize. They give us some funds for vocational education and special ed. Sales tax is based on how many student-aged children are living in the city, and there's a very detailed census that's based on. Again, the basic aid's the big piece that I just talked about, sales tax, and the other. That just shows you we went from 364 to 307 over the last 3 years. The proportions have remained about the same between because obviously sales tax dropped along with the other state revenues that came in through basic aid. We're not going to try to solve this equation. This is what is used. This is what is called the local composite index. Just a minute ago, I talked about how the fact that the aid that comes into the states is based on, it is means tested. It's based on how much the state judges each community should be able to fund for itself. It's based on three components: the real estate the total assessments of all the real estate within the school division. It's based on the adjusted gross incomes. The state pulls our AGI, or adjusted gross incomes, off of our collective income tax statements. And it also, there's a real estate factor. The real estate assessments are 50% of this. The adjusted gross incomes are 40%, and the sales tax piece, or sales, taxable sales, is 10%. And they weight that by the total amount of the assessed value over the whole state. In other words, in each of those components, they look at what we have in Virginia Beach and compare it with what is, the denominator of that is what's the adjusted gross incomes, the assessed real estate, and taxable sales across the entire state. So those are all rolled together, and that's what comes out as the local composite index, which is a huge driver on what we get from the state. In other words, I was showing you how that state portion was dropped from 364 down to 307. A huge part of that is the fact that we are, even though our assessments have gone down here in Virginia Beach, relative to the rest of the state, ours did not go down nearly as much as those in Northern Virginia and elsewhere across the Commonwealth. The blue portion of those bars is that which the state feels we should be paying ourselves. As you can see, it's floated between about 35 back at 10 years ago, dropped to about 33, and that's been moving up, and it is now at 40%. This gives you an idea of how we compare with the other cities around here. Chesapeake is at 34%. In other words, our city is expected to kick in 6% more of the total cost than Virginia Beach. Portsmouth only down at 24%. Again, remember the factors: adjusted gross incomes and available real estate that's assessed. Those are the factors, and that's what we see in the area here as far as our neighbors. These are actual dollars. The one on the left are the unweighted. In other words, that's the local dollars per student that each city has paid. And you can see the state average is way up there. But again, remember, this entire area is for the most part under the state averages, because we're only at 30, between like 25 and 40%. Northern Virginia, they're expected to pay a whole lot more. So that's why the state average is way up there. And we're, on an unweighted basis, we're at number 2, and Chesapeake is at number 3, and you can see how we compare. But then when you throw the composite index in as a weighting factor on what we should be paying locally compared to what the state is going to give us based on that index, you can see Virginia Beach is just under the state average. Chesapeake is actually significantly above us and above the state average, and our neighbors are a little bit, in some cases, significantly below us. Anyway, that just gives you some idea of the local support for education